Dr.Cliff AUD. Make you do real ear. Dr.Cliff AUD. Make you do real ear.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Gosalia. I'm very happy to introduce our next guest. This is Dr. Cliff Olson. He's the owner of Applied Hearing Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona, but you might know him better as the founder and star of the YouTube channel, DoctorCliffAuD. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So we're going to jump right in. So I want to know more about how you got from Illinois to here. So tell us your story.
I mean, it's a long story, so bear with me. But I mean, I grew up in a small farm town in Morris, Illinois, and about a 250-acre farm, not really big in the grand scheme of things, but out in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. It was actually a 15-minute car ride into town, which is like a 12,000 person town, right? Okay. So I spent there, about 18 years, 19 years before I actually went off to the military. So the whole story behind that was I went to community college for like a year, and I'm like, school is not for me.
Got it.
And so I'm like, there's got to be something else I can do. The military seemed like a great idea. So in August of 2001, I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and enlist in the United States Marine Corps. And so that's what I did. And then, as we all know, about a month later, September 11th happened. And so from that point on, it was a really interesting 4 years for me in the Marines. I had deployed a couple times, served as a scout sniper, so that's something that really kind of changed the trajectory of my life from that point. But something that actually happened in boot camp when I was going into the Marines was they identified a hearing loss in my right ear. And it's a really weird, like, 2-frequency cookie bite hearing loss where it goes, I'm like normal, down to 65 dB, 60 dB, and then back up to normal. And it's around about 1.52K. And so that kind of, I spent a lot of time. I had to go get an MRI for that, right? Because of unilateral hearing loss. And it was a thing where I thought they were going to kick me out. In fact, my senior drill instructor came up to me and said, Olson, do you want to become a Marine or do you want to go home? And I'm like, well, I really want to become a Marine, right? I'm here already, might as well stick it out. This is like week one. But I just assumed, and he said, we'll apply for a waiver. And like, great. So I just assumed that any day, like, the waiver would like not go through and they would say, Olson, you got to go. And I basically did that for 4 years, right? And then when I got out, I had just assumed that the waiver was approved, and I asked them, so where's that waiver at in my medical record? And it's like, waiver, what are you talking about? It's like, well, with my hearing loss, they're like, actually, we probably should have kicked you out. So so I ended up getting to stay in through that time. That was my initial introduction to just the world of audiology, because I had been tested several times, going to get that MRI and all of that. But it wasn't really something I'm like, you know what, audiology is what I want to do. That wasn't what I was thinking at the time. And so I ended up getting out of the Marine Corps in 2006. I ended up going and getting my massage therapy license. And so I had something to do while I was going through undergrad. So I actually started a massage therapy clinic when I was going through Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri. And then I ended up deciding, you know what, I was going for exercise science. I'm like, do I really want to be a personal trainer? Not that there's anything wrong with being a personal trainer, but I like to work out myself. I don't necessarily like to watch other people work out or, have them work out by me telling them what to do. It just doesn't get me fired up, And so I was like really starting to think hard about what do I really want to do, and it turns out my wife Ashley's cousin's husband, get that right?
Okay, I'm following.
So he's an audiologist, and so I actually reached out to him, Justin Tortolot, who's actually in Topeka, Kansas, and inquired about the career and the pros and cons of it, and I decided that was really the route that I wanted to go. So
and I appreciate the massage you gave me last night. And
no problem. Oh, geez, hey, that's between us, man. That's between us.
Shoulders are really coming yesterday. Yes.
So but I mean, and it's kind of interesting because that aspect of like patient care that I got from massage therapy, I knew that I wanted to do something along those lines. But I knew massage really wasn't it for me. First off, I have really skinny hands and forearms, and so I don't think I could keep up that workload for a number of years. But so I ended up applying to 3 different universities in Illinois. I was fortunate to still have, I had just used up, or I was using up up my Montgomery GI Bill.
Okay.
And Illinois is probably the best state to enlist in the military from, because they give you an Illinois Veterans Grant as well.
Okay.
So they actually pay for 4 years of, post-secondary or whatever.
Right.
And so I actually applied to, but you have to go to a state school.
Okay.
So I applied to 3 different universities in all state schools in Illinois, and I'm like, there's no way. Like, if I get into one, like, that's just where I'm going.
Right.
Because I'm an exercise science major. Like, no one's going to accept me.
Right.
Fortunately, our industry is very female dominated, I guess you would say, right?
Yep.
70%, I don't really know what the numbers are, but I think that probably played in my favor. Somehow I got into all 3, and so I picked the one that I felt fit the best, and University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana is the one I decided to go to, and it felt right. It probably didn't feel right for about the first year, because I'm like, what have I got myself into?
Right.
But after that point, it really started to make sense to me. I identified fairly early on that private practice was the route that I was going to want to go.
Right.
And so once I got through about 2 years of grad school, I'm like, I can't handle this weather anymore, and I got to get someplace warmer.
Warm, yeah.
Right. And I don't know if that's something.
So you went to the extreme.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wanted to go. So, funny story, a little segue off of this, but when I was changing duty stations from the East Coast to the West Coast, I drove through Phoenix, and it was about 115 degrees when I filled up my gas tank.
So it was what, November?
Right? Yeah. But it was just like, it was ridiculous. And I'm like, I could live here someday. Yeah. And so that was something that was, again, in the back of my mind. It was actually ended up being 10 years from that point that I actually moved out to Arizona to do my 4th year externship. And so I ended up working at an otology clinic, and so a lot of different experiences that I was able to get at that point, which is really nice. So I didn't feel like I was just pigeonholing myself into only understanding hearing aids, right? And I think that that's important for a lot of individuals. It's like, you really have to get the understanding.
Correct.
Of
get that
the whole scope, right?
Yep.
And then if you want to specialize after that, like, I think that that's really important. I think that you can do one thing really well if you want to.
Right.
I know that there's a lot of audiologists out there who do, several things really well, but it's just a lot easier to do one thing really well.
Yeah.
And so, but I knew that my time was limited at the otology clinic, and I wanted to expand and do my own thing. Private practice, I knew it. I knew it pretty early on. I had sold my massage practice when I went into audiology, so I knew that that's something that I wanted to do, was the actual private practice side of things.
Right.
And so I started Applied Hearing Solutions, and when I was starting it, I looked for the area that had no hearing care. So like, where in this valley, and the 6th largest metropolitan area in the country, in the United States. And I identified a little pocket just north of Phoenix in an area called Anthem that had no hearing health care at all. So I'm like, I'm just going to go up there. I'm going to kind of like mind my own business out in the middle of this area. And I opened it, and it was slow going, but and kind of something that, and this, but I had some pivotal moments, and I call it the perfect storm that happened to me. And I ended up getting into a situation where, in my 4th year, I ended up going to a talk by Gus Mueller. And Gus had actually told me at the end of that, you know what, Cliff, if you want to be a great audiologist, all you need to do is print out the best practices, follow them, and you'll be in the top 5%.
Correct.
Right. So some variation of that is what he actually told me, and it's very distinct to me when he told me that. It was a very inspiring talk that he gave. I wasn't at the point yet where I was doing things that were not correct yet. I mean, still a student, right? You're trying to follow,
trying to find
exactly. So so that really stuck with me. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that I ended up, when I opened the clinic, I'm like, okay, I'm in the same position I was when I opened up my massage clinic, which is I have no patients, right? We got to figure out how to get patients. And so worked with a manufacturer, and the answer to that was like, well, we'll purchase some devices, we'll do a mailing for you, right? And then we'll get people in your doors. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do on the mailing? Well, let's see. We'll highlight the technology. You can give free hearing tests and a free hearing aid evaluation. And I'm thinking, like, wait a second, but that's where my value is. That's what I'm good at, is the doing these things to make the devices work, right? If I highlight the technology, like where's the value being placed?
Right. There's no value in free.
Exactly. There's no value in free. And once you do that like one time, it's like that's the expectation, you know? And so I was like, okay, so that's the second part of the perfect storm. Well, then there was a bunch of different area publications, right? So newspapers, magazines that are very keyed in to that specific area that we're in. And it was, I want to say like $5,000 to $6,000 a year for me to go ahead and place like a quarter-page ad in these magazines. Again, at the urging of like, well, make sure that you give a good discount there, so you can get, good calls and get traffic from that. I did some kind of a discount on there. I don't remember what it was, but I wanted it to be informational as well. So that was probably a part of why it was so ineffective.
Yes.
And it still drives me crazy, right? When you spend like $6,000 and
you get no results.
And every time you call them, they're like, well, you got to give it time. They have to see it like 30 times before anyone. I mean, come on.
Yeah, times $6,000 every single time.
I know, and it's just, so if I do this for another 2 years, maybe I'll get a call. But that's the thing, we tracked it, and we got like nothing from it, and from several different publications. So that was the other part. And then the cherry on top was just all of this talk online about how there's no value in the audiologist, or in the expert that's helping you navigate this journey and utilizing this technology. And you just see it all over the place. And you're like, these are the ones who are dictating, the people saying this stuff are dictating the perception. Right? And I found that to be unacceptable. So, and I was like, I don't have a whole lot of patience right now. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start video recording informational content for consumers specifically, and really not care whether they come to see me. So I think that, and I know that you like to talk about growth and all of that, like the best thing that you can do is create information with no expectation of something in return.
Exactly.
Right? I had, and I know you had mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk as well, but I started that concept in my head and then somehow stumbled across Gary, and he was just kind of validating all the things that I was saying. So in the first 6 months when nobody watched my channel and I was taking every weekend, it takes me an entire day to produce one video, like one 5 to 10 minute video. And hardly anyone's watching it, but I do that, weekend after weekend, and then when you kind of throw Gary Vee in there, and he's kind of, saying
you
like
get that consistency going.
That's right. You got to be consistent with it, and so I ended up starting the DoctorCliffAuD YouTube channel, and purely for that informational purpose to the consumer, because I'm like, if someone's going to control what consumers view us as being, I want it to be someone who actually knows what we do, right?
Take hold of the narrative. Adopt the narrative, own it.
Right? And we can do that as professionals in this industry. Like, it doesn't have to be just me. I mean, there's providers who contact me all the time looking for advice on how to, grow information for their own clinic or for themselves, and I'm more than happy to share that with them, right? Rising tide raises all ships,
Absolutely.
right? So, getting into like the growth of the channel side of things, I mean, obviously the clinic has benefited from that immensely, right? I mean, people come in all the time from all over the place saying, I just want to see this guy, who's talking, I feel like he knows what he's talking about, right? And for the most part, I feel like I do know what I'm talking about. But by no means do I think I'm the greatest audiologist out there, right?
Absolutely.
It's just I'm the only one who, to any level of consistency, at least at this point, to where consumers are viewing and seeing all this information that we put out, right? So it took about, and I can't remember the numbers because I've posted them kind of along the way. I want to say it took me like 8 months to get up to, I think it was like a couple thousand viewers. And then it started to kind of snowball
from
after that point. The really key thing here, YouTube-wise anyway, and I can't speak for the other platforms because I'm not huge on the other platforms, is that consistency is the key. I'll just share a little kind of side story on that, is that I was going to be, getting ready for the conference that we're at here at AudBus, and I was getting ready for this, so a lot of my time was taken up by developing the content and the presentation for this and the network and all of that, which we'll of course get into. But it was, I had been cutting down my workload of creating the videos for my channel in that time. So I was going down to, for about a month period, doing 1 video a week instead of 2 videos a week.
Right.
And one of the videos was going to be a sponsored video this past week, and the manufacturer said, hey, we got to hold off on that video because we're releasing something else. And I totally understand. So I paused it. And so there was a 2-week gap, technically, that went by without me posting a video.
Right.
And my views got cut in half.
It's dropped.
Cut in
Absolutely.
half.
Yep.
So like if you're producing, consistently to some degree, or if you're not producing consistently, YouTube punishes you if you don't produce consistently and you don't post consistently, because then you don't pop up in recommendations, right? It's not a follow-up video to a previous video that you've done.
Right.
And then I posted again this past Monday, and it returned back to normal.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like it went from like I was good, cut in half. Okay, we're back good again. So it's like,
Yeah, because you have like 50,000 followers, and then you get like 500,000 views or over 500,000 views every month on your channel. So losing half of those is crazy.
It's a huge. And fortunately, it was just like a 5 to 7 day blip on the schedule, right? Because when you don't post for a week, they're like, oh well, he's still posting consistently each week, and so but then as soon as like that week goes by, that's when the dip happened.
You lost about twice the size of that first town you lived in Illinois.
Yeah, basically. I know, that's crazy.
God.
It's crazy.
So we're here in Naples, Florida, and we're here at the Odd Boss Conference, which is a conference for private practitioners learning how to grow and getting these new concepts. And Dr. Cliff is announcing his new network, and the network is essentially it's a portal for people to be able to find a provider who practices best practices. Now, I will attest, before this ever started, some of the patients that I've seen that have reached out or were followers of Dr. Cliff, he was generous enough to send them or recommend them come to us, and every single one of them came to us, and they're all doing very, very well. They're educated patients, they know what they're talking about, they know what to expect, and of course we in our clinic follow best practices. And I used to work I'm going to sidebar here for a second, because I used to work in a little hearing aid dispensing office on Bell Road and 7th Avenue.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
ages
close,
before I even got into audiology. That's what spurred me to go into audiology. And so when you talk about Anthem, I know exactly where that is, because I grew up right in Moon Valley. And so, but anyways, that's a sidebar when we talk about the network here. So how do people get involved in this network? Because I can tell you, at least from our experience, it's something that we're going to dive into, because it just makes so much sense. It doesn't make sense not to join it.
Yeah, I was always trying to figure out a way. The biggest problem that I have right now, we'll kind of kick it off that way, is that I get a ton of phone calls and emails every day, and they're like, where do we go? And I'm like, I don't know. Like if I'm lucky enough, I know someone personally, and I know that they follow best practices, and I can directly refer them to that individual. But I've only been an audiologist for like 3 years now, right? I don't know a whole lot of other audiologists out there, let alone if their clinic practices best practices, right? So essentially the network kind of developed out of a necessity for me to identify where the really good clinicians are. So when these consumers who are coming to me to say, hey, where do I go? So I don't look like an a-hole, right? Referring them to somewhere that's going to give them a horrible experience, right? And so these consumers are looking for someone who kind of like practices the way that I practice, but to be honest, the way that I practice is just following best practices, and I just try to make it to where the individual understands what we're doing. So they understand, like, this is what a best practice is, this is why we do it. So, and actually you had approached me about this, like, there needs to be a way where you can, take that goodwill essentially that's built up and pass that along to other audiologists who are doing things the right way. So it took us, and I know that, and you're one of the individuals on my advisory board to help come up with some of this criteria to require of providers to gain entry into the network. And so the whole concept is that I vet the provider, and if they meet the requirements, then they can be in the network. Right? And then we have them on our website locator tool for DoctorCliffAuD.com. And so when all these consumers who are they're calling and they're asking, right, we can refer them directly to the clinic locator tool, rather the provider locator tool, right? So if you are a provider who works in 3 different clinics, well, you as the provider are the approved one, and that transfers, like if you go work at this clinic or that clinic or whatever, right, you are the approved provider. So you could technically have a clinic that has, 5 providers, but only one of them actually follows best practices. Well, guess what? that's the provider
one.
that's approved.
And it's 100% not a certification. It's a totally voluntary thing that people can sign up for. Of course, meeting all the requirements, which we'll post here in the video or in a link down below. So where do they get this training?
Yeah, so one of the requirements is that you have to actually understand what the requirements are to be in my network. And so you're gracious enough to have me out here at this conference so I could do the initial launch of it. Gave a pretty solid talk yesterday explaining all of the criteria to it. But I am going to be developing a web-based, seminar essentially that they can watch that can satisfy that requirement of it. And it's not necessarily that I'm teaching you how to perform best practices.
Correct.
That's not it. Like, we've all been through school.
Yep.
That's something that you should know how to do, right? It's the implementation of it is the key. So I'm basically specifying these are the things that you need to do. There's certain checklists that we have, and so consumers are going to have access to these checklists, right? To be honest, whether you're a provider in the network or not, there's going to be consumers that come into your clinic and hand you these and say, Dr. Cliff says you need to be doing these, and you're either going to be like, well, we can do them, or you're going to be like, oh boy, I'm not prepared for this. I don't know. We don't have a test box. We don't do real ear. I mean, it's going to happen, right? I think when I asked for people to raise their hands in the conference here yesterday, the vast majority of providers in the room raised their hand when I asked them if they had anyone who came in asking for real ear, if anyone had come in mentioning Dr. Cliff videos, right, or who had specifically received a referral from me for it. And so we're just at the beginning. Is the crazy thing. We're 2 years in.
It's just going to grow.
It's just going to keep growing, and that's the goal. And that really is the other part of the network specifically, right? Is that by me kind of taking this, and there's a cost to be in the network, right? But that cost is directly taken so I can remove myself from the clinic a little bit more, so I can develop more video content to promote the network essentially to consumers who are looking for great hearing healthcare providers.
That's perfect.
Right? So, I know there's a little pushback. There's going to be pushback with it, and I'm okay with it, right? I'm a big boy. I can handle the criticism from it, and I can understand why individuals would criticize, to be quite honest, right?
Well, it's an untested situation for a lot of people, and people don't know you, and they don't know, well, why should I trust you versus something else? Right.
I've been in this industry such a short amount of time. Not a lot of people know me on a personal level like you do. Right. And so I totally understand that I'm going to have to earn, essentially the trust of providers who are out there who are like, who is this kid who's coming in, who's requiring us to do certain things?
He's only been around for 3 years.
Exactly. So, but I know that this is about the consumer. It's not about us, right? Like, I'm not doing this so you can get more patients.
Correct.
That's not my goal.
It's not a market.
To be quite honest, how you run your clinic and all of that, like, that's the focus of your clinic, is to serve your patients and to make a living doing it, right? My goal is to get consumers to go to providers who are doing a good job. Right.
Absolutely.
And if I can do that, then I'm happy.
And the reality is the requirements on what we need to do for the network are what we should be doing already. I mean, that's the reality.
That's
it's not like you're asking us to do things that we don't do.
Right, and it can be done in a clinic. So when I was developing the criteria, all of the stuff I do in my clinic was based off of the guidelines, right? The AAA best practice guidelines. And so when I was writing these up, it's like, okay, well, what do I do in my clinic? And so I was actually like, okay, well, we do this, and by the time I got done with it, I'm like, well, it's just all the stuff we do.
It's just the normal stuff.
And it's just the stuff that we should all be doing, right? This whole talk about, like, okay, why are there best practices? Right. Well, it's to maximize patient outcomes. Right. But they were all things that research has proven to be of value. To a consumer. Now, if we feel like they take too much time and stuff like that, well, the question becomes is then what are you doing? If you don't find them to be valuable, why are you not presenting them to the patient in a way that they see them to be valuable? Right? So, like test box measures, I want to touch base on that real quick. And I know I get long-winded on this stuff, so I apologize, right? No, I think this is good stuff, and I get jazzed up about it. But test box measures, right? So you can take a hearing aid in the back room, do a test box measure, make sure that it's functioning properly, then just quietly come back in the room and say, everything's looking good.
How long does that take? An hour?
Right? Like a few minutes, right?
Maximum,
I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
do have to, connect it to the software really
Yep.
quick, which is getting faster and faster because cables almost don't exist anymore,
Almost wireless,
right?
yep.
And then, if you have good solid equipment that you can go in really quick, do the measurement, run through the curves, takes, a minute maybe per hearing aid to actually run through all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You either print it out, take it to the patient, or if you have a really great, software integrated
Network, yep.
system, you can walk back into your room, pull it up on your screen, and then you actually explain it to them.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how many patients' minds are blown away by text box measure?
Yeah.
Probably more than even real ear measurement,
Wow.
to be honest.
That's interesting,
right?
yeah.
And so it's all about you placing the value on these things that are actually valuable
Right.
to the patient.
Uh-huh.
And if we start doing that better, then it's all justifiable, right, in the normal clinic routine. And then in some states, you can even have an audiology assistant be doing the measures for you to explain, or even you see what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah,
there's ways that you can
absolutely.
go about it.
Incorporate all those ancillary staff, if you
Yeah.
will, to take care of some of the non-revenue generating
Absolutely,
activities.
absolutely. So, but and it all just it creates value in the patient's eyes, and that's really our job, is to
Yeah.
create value for them, right? Whether it's actual real value from a hearing standpoint, or whether
Yeah.
it's some perceptual value, so they actually feel confident and happy with their treatment,
Yeah.
right? Both of those are important.
Yeah. Man, this is all awesome stuff, and we're really excited for the launch. I have a list of all the advisors that are a part of your the new network, and excited about all your growth. You just found a new spot for your Applied Hearing Solutions in North Phoenix, so congrats on that.
Thank
And
you.
We're excited to keep seeing great content.
I know
and,
it's going to keep coming, man.
yeah,
So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Cliff Olson, I've got links in the down below, and stay tuned for our next episode, which will come out next week.
Thanks, bud.
Dr. Cliff AUD. Make you do real ear. Dr. Cliff AUD. Make you do real ear.